Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Acom? Here. Mr. Zayas?
Here.
Mrs. Connor?
Here.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Here.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Here.
Next, we would move into the hearing of the public on agenda and non-agenda items, but no one signed up, so we will move on to the approval of minutes. We had 2 meetings in July, a special meeting on July 11th and a regular meeting on July 24th, and we'll take them separately. So first, looking at the minutes from July 11th, may I have a motion, please, for approval?
Move.
Second.
Are there any comments, additions, or edits to those minutes? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes. Minutes are approved as written. Then we had our regular meeting on July 24th. May I have a motion for approval of those minutes?
Moved.
Second.
Any comments or edits to those minutes? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Abstain.
Mrs. Connor?
Abstain. Minutes are approved as written. Moving on to the superintendent's report, Mr. Burke.
All right, thank you. Paul, I'll just give you a signal when you're ready. Not yet, though. So I'd like to take a few minutes to share our plans for the upcoming 5.9 mil operating levy scheduled for November 7th. To start, I did want to remind the board that Bill and I will be a little more limited on what we can and can't say or do than in years past with levies. The rules haven't really changed, but the interpretation by the state auditor's office and enforcement is now more restrictive. So communication providing factual information regarding the levy is allowed, but it should be designed to influence support for or against a bond issue, to not influence support or against the bond issue. Our plan is to provide straightforward factual information that is neutral in nature. We also will make ourselves available to answer questions concerning anything from the levy, because factual information regarding the district's finances, operations, and the need for the levy may be shared in public. However, that information should be neutral, accurate, and supported by facts without advocating for or against the passage of the levy. So, for example, we can't say, please help us keep our schools strong, because that implies that, we should probably vote for the levy, somebody should vote for the levy. So we have to be very careful with what we say. So I hope you and our families won't misinterpret either Bill or my neutrality as not being enthusiastic about the school district, as we provide the information, but in a form of a neutral message to the community. So, Paul, if you don't mind. We have already started and will continue to provide a series of meetings about the levy and local community groups. We started with our convocation day, where we talked to all the staff and let them know about the levy and reminded them of what it's about. That was August 14th, and then the next day I met with the Aurora Chamber of Commerce to discuss the same topic, again, all the factual information. In September, we've got plans to meet with the Aurora Schools Foundation, and then I'm going to sit down with the realtors at Howard Hanna to be able to go over and answer any questions they might have, because obviously that plays a major role as well in terms of house sales. And then finally, on the 28th, our Superintendent Advisory Council, which is composed of 16 different community groups, is going to be, that's going to be the topic for that particular meeting. We'll also meet with the PTO and with Rotary, though those dates have not been scheduled yet, and as well as any other community groups that might arise or even locations that come up. We have a variety of community meetings scheduled for this location here at the conference center, which will be open to all of the public and community, starting with Tuesday, October 3rd, and then Thursday, October 12th, as you can see, from 7 to 8, and Wednesday, October 18th. So the goal is to try to hit a couple different days so that, we'll catch people, sport events, and things like that, and we'll get that information out to the public as well. And then in terms of communication about the 5.9 mil operating levy, my September Aurora City Schools District update to families will be focused on the facts concerning the levy. Bill is set to be my guest on the October Spotlight on Aurora Schools, which is our cable show. And then on the show, he'll be sharing financial information and facts about the, the operating levy for November. And then our first quarterly Your Schools, the newspaper, news pamphlet we send out, that will be scheduled to come out in October, and that will also share just factual information concerning the levy. So we do anticipate a levy committee, which I am unable to lead and Bill is unable to be the treasurer of, We're suspecting that'll form in September with a focus on sharing information about the levy through social media. And finally, we suspect the levy committee will also have signs going up around the community approximately 2 weeks before the November election. So all in all, our goal is to get the factual information out to as many people as possible so that they're able to make an educated decision concerning the Aurora City Schools November operating levy. Any questions in relation to that as it stands?
Who placed all those restrictions on you? In this?
So yeah, it's a state auditor's interpretation of some of the rules that are already there. And there was actually a superintendent and a board which was actually prosecuted because they did not follow the steps as was seen appropriate. So all superintendents and boards are being encouraged to be sure, and treasurers, to be sure that they are sending a neutral message, but an educational, informative message.
All right. Well,
It's kinda
the
hard,
facts
but-
tell a good story, so.
Yeah.
Hope it works.
Yes, they do. The facts are very good. Any other questions? Okay, then Paul?
All right, thank you. It's that time of the year where we're back in school and it's fall, and try to give the board a little, as I'd like to call, a little temperature check on where we stand. As the board knows, in the spring, we're looking at April, May, there's all kinds of testing going on with the end-of-course assessments, the advanced placement exams, and so we start to get back a lot of those results on how students achieved. In the summer, some of it was in June, some of it was in July. And so I'm starting to get some of that information in. Tonight I wanted to focus on the advanced placement exams and scores, sort of summarize some of that for you. And then this will be part one, and then part two next month will be more of a focus on EOCs. We have some comparative results, and we're starting to get some preliminary reports in the secure data center. So we have a pretty good idea where we stand, but we'll have a much better idea in September and October. Before I get into what I'm going to talk about tonight with the advanced placement scores, tomorrow, my understanding is that the U.S. News and World Report results will be released, or honors will be released, which is one we always pay a close attention to because it's a combination of advanced placement scores, IB scores, we don't have those, and then your end-of-course assessments, so we feel it's just really a good barometer. So we're anticipating what that's going to look like tomorrow, and we'll share what I assume is going to be good news sometime soon, and maybe even talk about that next month. And then in September 15th, the report card will come out, so we'll spend some more time on the state report card, perhaps in September and October. And then finally, there's going to be a new award that's going to be coming out from the College Board, which is really just, it's mostly focused on awarding schools who have high achievement in access, in terms of access, meaning students accessing high-level AP courses, which I'm going to talk about tonight, and then obviously the scores associated with the students. So it really kind of dovetails nicely with what I'm talking about tonight, but we don't have those honors yet. We just know that we're going to be included. So lots of news and good news coming out in the next month or so, and we'll continue to share that. But tonight, I'm going to focus on advanced placement. So I did share some of the past 12 years of some of this longitudinal data and highlighted a few different years. So I'll talk a little bit about that and then talk about some of the individual awards that the students earned as well. So you can see this first slide goes back to 2012. This is a little bit of a rerun to last year, highlighted 14, 15, and 17. And one of the things I always draw your attention to when I share those is really look at your passing percentage, look at your total number of tests, look at the mean and then test pass, because that's obviously the access, the number of students taking these courses and the tests, and then obviously the higher passing percentage, the higher the mean, that means the students are scoring those 3s, 4s, and 5s, which is great, and obviously makes us very proud. It also makes the students happy, and typically their families love that as well, because most of the time that translates to college credits and college readiness, and so those are all good news. So 14, 15, and 17, you can see up there, we're really strong years because of those reasons, if you look at those factors I just mentioned. We did have a little dip around the time of COVID, which I talked to you all about that. I'm happy to report I've also now highlighted 22 and 23, two bellwether years as we sort of recover and get back to where we want to be. So you can see the number of tests, 867 and 821. You can see the passing percentage, 82.6 to 84.3. And really, I like to see anything above 80%, up until 85% or so, with a high number of students taking those tests. And then obviously the test passed. One thing I would note, though, is that we did have a little bit of a smaller class. We have a smaller senior class this year. And so that impacts this a little bit because, you tend to have a lot of juniors taking advanced placement tests and courses. So that's really good news. That's exactly what we want to see. And obviously, this is something that we hang our hat on in the district and at the high school. Did borrow a couple of Mr. Hayes' Canva images to share with you as well, since he does a nice job with those and it sums it up. And this just talks a little bit about the number of students, the passing percentage, and it being the highest, passage rate since 2014-15. And then the last thing I wanted to bring your attention to, and I know that this is a lot up on that big screen, but I did give you, a screenshot of this a little closer on your report. But this is something that was just started recently for College Board, honoring those students who are AP Scholars, who are AP Scholars with honor and AP Scholars with distinction. So we had 84 students honored in such a way. 60 of them were the AP Scholar, and that basically means they got a 3 or higher on 3 or more exams, which is, really pretty incredible. But then even more incredible, we had 43 of them have a 3.25 on average on all AP exams, 3 or higher on 4 or more of those exams. And then finally with distinction, a 3.5 scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more exams. So just pretty amazing that our students are doing that kind of work. And obviously, kudos to those individual students. Want to give a pat on the back to all of our AP instructors. Certainly they did great work with those students. But really, if you think about the curriculum and where the students have to get to have those scores, it's really all the teachers that they had previously in their foundational skills and all the courses leading up to that too. So I really like to think that this is, certainly we give our AP teachers credit, but there's a lot of work and time by lots of other educators and teachers working with those students to get them to that place to earn at such high levels. And like I said, this is something we really pride ourselves on, and we know it's something that our students and our staff and our community values too. So love to share this good news and the sort of the overall picture and all the good work by these individual students as well. So take any questions or comments or anything before we move on to the treasurer's report, if you have any.
I appreciate what you said about all the educators playing a part in these great scores. I'm curious to know, do these tests change from year to year?
They change every single year. That's not to say that they can't have, I guess, recycled questions. They could use some similar questions, but they change. And sometimes every few years, the formats might change, and the types of essays change, or the type of work, or maybe even a scope and sequence. So yeah, they're changing. And even new courses. For example, we're offering the AP Pre-Calculus, which I think I told you all about last year when we approved the program of studies. So that'll be a new one that quite a few of our students will be taking this year.
Great. Okay, anything else?
Just curious, would we have access to see other districts' scores? Just to, for benchmarking sake, comparison's sake?
It's not like the OST scores in a sense where I have a dashboard or performance index. We don't really have that for advanced placement. What we look at is when the U.S. News and World Report comes out, there will be components that go into that honor, and part of that is the placement on reading and math in the OSTs or EOCs, and then part of that is sort of the college readiness scores, which they'll take from these advanced placement scores, and a lot of it has to do with how many students are taking them in passing percentage. It doesn't necessarily break it down into every single subject, because you're talking about 20-some subject areas, but it does give us an idea.
Okay.
You can see comparable data from AP score from our school compared to the state versus
Right.
local as well.
Okay.
So we can see that from the state, which is great.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't have, I have spreadsheets and all kinds of comparative data that I'm working on compiling right now with other districts, and then that's not really available for advanced placement. Good question, though.
Well, we look forward to hearing about the EOCs and the OSTs.
Yeah, same thing. EOCs, OSTs, same terms. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Volleson?
Thank you, Mrs. Hollis. This evening, I just have two resolutions for your consideration, and I'll start with the first one, the financial report for July. And for July, our revenues exceeded expenditures by about $6.5 million, increasing our general fund cash balance to a little over $19 million. Revenues are about 5% greater than projected, and expenditures about 0.2% less. When we put the projections together, the initial revenue and expenditure projections, basically I developed them by utilizing the budgeted line items and the average percentage of either receipts or expenses from each line item that, occurred over previous years. And then I adjust them based upon, known parameters such as repaid months, when we have to pay for our debt payments for late and things such as that. So in July, on the revenue side, we received our 4 property tax advances from Portage County, which this year totaled nearly $9.2 million. As an example, last July, we received about $7.8 million. So really all that's telling us, when we get a final settlement in August, it'll be lower than what it was last year. It all kind of even out. And really what it comes down to is how fast the money's coming into the county will determine how fast or how much each advance is that we get. And the final settlement from Portage County, it was in August, and we'll receive our Summit County one probably in September sometime. And that'll complete our first half of the year tax payments. Expenditure side, after the first month, everything's pretty much running as we would expect. Some timing of payments, but everything runs pretty close. So thus far for the fiscal year, revenues are about $488,000 greater than projected, and expenditures about $7,400 less, giving us a favorable variance right now of nearly $500,000. But again, that'll change next month because our taxes that we received from Portage County will be a little lower since the advances were higher than what they had last year.
Okay, thank you for that report. Exhibit D1 is a resolution to approve the financial statements and reports. May I have a motion, please?
Move. Second.
Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Volleson? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas? Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
And the second resolution, D2, is a whole bunch of transfers. And really what we're doing here is cleaning up a bunch of different activity accounts at the high school. So some of them had a little bit of money left over. You could see the class of 2014 had $10.38 left. So in reality, what we're doing, all of those funds that you can see, the different ones listed there, transfer to the general fund, and then from there we transfer it back to the high school school support fund, their principal's account essentially. And so these will be, all of these activity accounts that you see there will now be closed out as no more activity will occur into them. So this is mainly just a cleaning up of some of the accounts at the high school from the different activity accounts.
Okay, thank you. Exhibit D2, a resolution to approve appropriation amendments. May I have a motion, please? Chair seconds. Any comments or questions? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Resolutions are both approved.
Concludes my
Thank you for that report. Okay, moving on to new business, we have a resolution to accept gifts and contributions. We have Aurora Youth Travel Basketball having donated $1,500 to the boys' basketball program and $1,500 to the girls' basketball program. Also, the high school PTO donated $200 for brain breaks, and the elementary PTO donated $1,000 to Miller, Layton, and Craddock for PBIS. May I have a motion for approval?
Moved. Second.
Any comments or questions? Just thank you very much
Yeah.
to all those groups. Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas? Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
All right, we have 11 personnel resolutions, and without objection, we'll take those together. Exhibit E1B1 is a resolution to accept resignations. Exhibit E1B2 is a resolution to approve the introductory appointment of support staff. Exhibit E1B3 is a resolution to employ support staff substitutes for this current school year. Exhibit E1B4 is a resolution to employ licensed substitute teachers for this school year. Exhibit E1B5 is a resolution to award a one-year limited contract. Exhibit E1B6 is a resolution to employ a part-time support staff member. Exhibit E1B7 is a resolution to approve a revised salary schedule for a network operations manager. Exhibit E1B8 is a resolution to award summer supplemental contract. Exhibit E1B9 is a resolution to award supplemental contracts to district personnel. Exhibit E1B10 is a resolution to employ a long-term substitute specialist. And Exhibit E1B11 is a resolution to employ long-term substitute teachers for this current school year. May I have a motion for approval?
Moved.
Are there any comments or questions about those resolutions? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
All right, Exhibit E1C is a resolution to approve bus stops for this current school year. May I have a motion for approval?
Move.
Second.
Any comments or questions? This is something we have to do every year. Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Exhibit E1D is a resolution to approve the final budgets for activity accounts for school year 22-23. May I have a motion for approval?
Move.
Chair.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? I'm going to ask Mr. Volleson to just explain this briefly. Could you do that?
Sure. E1D, these are all the different activity accounts at the various buildings. This is last year's. So it just kind of shows where the money came in from and how the money went out. The next resolution will be the projected ones for this school year. So they pretty much tie into what we spent last year. So the various accounts, and some of them, as I had mentioned earlier, from the high school will be, being closed out, and those will be gone. But by and large, these are just all the various, and you can see how many different funds and accounts that we have, especially when you look at the high school environment. Different things between clubs, between Rotary funds for field trips, so on and so forth.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
All right. Exhibit E1E is a resolution to approve the statements of purpose and budgets for activity accounts for this current school year, as explained to us a minute ago. May I have a motion, please? Chair seconds. Any comments or questions? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Okay, Exhibit E1F is a resolution to approve the creation of new interscholastic athletic teams, and we have decided to table this, and so I need a motion in order to do that, please.
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
All right, so we will table that for further discussion at another time. Exhibit E1G is a resolution to approve the purchase of a Ford Transit van. May I have a motion for approval?
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? I feel like we keep trying to buy this
Yeah.
van. What is
So,
happening with
yeah,
this
so
van?
this one is actually not a passenger van because those are still not available. This one, we have a maintenance van that is starting to rust away. And so because we can't get the passenger van, we thought we'd at least get our hands on the maintenance van so that we have that in place. And we're still gonna be, Paul's gonna actually be looking for some, his sources for a passenger van so we can
Why
have
can't
this
we
for
get
the
a
call.
passenger van?
I really don't know, other than we've been trying, but they are bought before they're even built, and so trying to work through the state, there's not a lot out there.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mr. Zias? Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
All right, and we have no discussion items. Are there any board items? All right, hearing none, I will ask for a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Sabolsky?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Zias?
Meeting is adjourned.